Well, peace, cosmic family. How have you been? Are you ready for this full reset? Hope you're shining bright today as I'm sending you this awesome daptastic energy, from the pulse of the sun. And I first want to thank the ancestor that lives through my encoded DNA and has gifted me with high levels of gnosis. It has been sorely missing from our current paradigm. And as always, I want to thank you for tuning in through this 4-part lecture series, Culture, baby, of Every Planet Wears a Crown. Today I have my crown on. This is my Impulse company. I'm going to get you in the pulse right now of the rhythm of Every Planet Wears a Crown. This lecture series has been divided into 4 parts, and that was 1, 2, and 3. If you have not caught up with those, I will have a link to those in the description below. But I'd first like to review what I did in those 3 topics, or those 3 lectures. So let's deep dive through this cosmic reality, dabbling in some deep, etherical, solar, and lunar knowledge that's strictly been hidden. And because it hasn't been quite given, these pimps and pimpologists who teach all these other great spiritual things, pimp with tithings of good bitings. Anyway, I'm just messing with you right now. But I do want to dive right back into a review session. So let's go to part 1, my cosmic family. I expanded on several mythologies, including but not exclusive to the Sumerians and the Anunnaki. You know what I'm saying? The Dogon and the Nomo, Mayans and their blue serpent beings. Go back to part 1. I talk about that. And then, even down to Aztecs and Quetzalcoatl, being that comes out of the waters. I could keep going, but just to name a few outside of the current popular, very popular religious systems, spiritual systems, however you want to call them, being it Hindu, Christian, Buddhists, Islamicists. Could I keep going? Benais, Judaisms, isms and schisms and all those religions. But that's great because you had creation stories that just blew past the facts and made very beautiful mythologies. But here, part 4, we're here to illuminate your mind so that you can take what your stories told you and be more illuminated in the truth. In part 1, I explained that we were a cosmic species, highly evolved, fam. Highly evolved on a 90% gigantic water planet called Tiamat for the time being. I've said that many times, but there's just a reason, because names I just used for context don't always really go into the actual naming convention that was used by our far-off ancestors. Now, our planet also had a 3-star system, and that was Sirius A, Sirius B, and Sirius C, which our sun is currently Sirius C, you dig? And in our ancient cosmic ancestors, they had this itch to explore the galaxy with their physical beings, being that they had mastered the ability to be reborn from their star systems and never miss any time, no time gaps. And going through these rebirth cycles for them lasted thousands and thousands of years, as their orbit around the sun and the other stars were much longer period than this little planet Earth. So for them it was, hundreds of years, but for what we conceptualize as time on this spin around the Earth, it was thousands and thousands and thousands of years. because time right now is only calculated by orbits around the sun. So Tiamat, like I said, the exploring culture there was very dolphin-esque, dragon creatures, and they just wanted to explore the galaxy, kind of innocently. And they had a guardian that was a master of the solar systems and planned to guide them safely across this journey through the galaxy. Logically, it was just going to be a fun adventure. By moving Sirius C across the, cosmic span of the galaxy, okay, with all of its planets that encircle Sirius C. And there's other planets out there circling Sirius A and Sirius B, just so you could be very, just stay with that thought, hold that, okay? And the Guardian ran into some unforeseen circumstances that began a great downfall of this great aquatic being. It was really like as if they were destined to make these choices. You know what I'm saying? And this was because they had, in their moving of the planet Tiamat, caught a planet called Nibiru in a gravitational well, or an electromagnetic gravitational well, that made the planet start its commencement towards entering the solar system. And this would take millions of years, which gave them time. But that's where, we left off with this telepathic species that could also manipulate water. It's how they're moving their sun, by the way. And that's what we did in part 1. Now, in part 2, I described the physical makeup of the ancient cosmic ancestors and how they were dolphin-like creatures, really describing their features. With like dragon, physical nature things, some things there that were dragon-esque, being that they have very wavy arms, you know what I'm saying? And they could manipulate, the physical world better than we can right now. They were very much more adept in their dexterity than we are with these little bone systems and appendages. But that's not for right now. This is still a review of part 2. And, they were looking to, their idea, again, was to escape this impending collision that was about to happen between Tiamat and Nibiru. And all they needed right now was a plan with the Guardian to understand the cosmic order and how to slow track an escape to other planets in their own solar system from their own understandings. And this was a long fall for them from their deserved evolution that took a long time for them to get to where they currently were. And that was part 2. In part 3, I explained the story of how we fell from a 12 chakra system on planet Tiamat, being a bigger planet, more chakras physically, encompassed, to this little 7 chakra planet here on Earth that we purposefully engineered as a higher species to grow by giving it a moon that we pulled from Jupiter, right? Imagine, anyway, I'm gonna jump off topic for a second. Imagine if we hadn't pulled that moon from Jupiter. But anyway, we pulled the moon from Jupiter to spin around the planet Earth to make it expand at its equator, causing it to spread and grow. Okay? And I talked a little bit about plate tectonics and that separation stuff, and reviewed the destruction of when Tiamat actually was destroyed in the heavens, and how there were inhabitants on Earth and Mars able to look up in the sky and witness the entire event during the time of what we call dinosaurs, huge reptiles, okay, that came from the planet Tiamat here on Earth and on Mars, but witnessed the destruction of Tiamat. And I also talked about how the asteroid belt that's outside of Mars and Jupiter is the remnants of that, but at the time that they were living caused a rain down of meteorites, some destroying the freaking moon on Mars, and the destruction of Mars, picking up where this video just cut off because my phone overheated, fully, outright destroyed because its moon then cracks and destroys the planet. While our moon is just getting bombardment of fragments, our planet caught a bigger meteor, and we were, as a species, cleanly wiped out of our gnosis. And how we then, through recovery, began to migrate to the pole, the South Pole, the Southern Pole, the North Pole of the planet, where Antarctica is, and the equators, and inhabit those lands, one being Atlantis, one being the Lemurians. And we inhabited those lands for thousands of years before we were able to reconstitute our cultures and come back together. And now you have a combination of a very technical being who has been manipulating ice and water in Atlantis, and you have a very mystical, natural being that has been manipulating the grasses, the trees, and the lands excuse me, through water systems of rivers, lakes, and such near the equator. Two totally different types of understanding, but two mammalian species, melanated, coming back together, moving southern in a direction down from the tip of South Africa up African continent towards the Egyptian plains, the Saharas, where there was not a desert but a beautiful, lush, still garden. Not the Garden of Eden. Our Garden of Eden was in Mars, but this was all reviewed in part 3. And now, this coming together of these two mammalian tribes created the kinds of humans that you and I are today. Because you had a partial loss of melanation in the Atlantic or Atlantis tribes. I would not say they were pale. That would be a farce. They were still copper-toned people. Then you have the brown to purplish colored people living around the equator systems in Lemuria. Also very magical people. The remembrance of the moon is what kind of gave them DNA remembrance of their ancient falls. I mean, their great fall. Because now for them, a lot of time has transpired. Again, I said this was millions of years. So the remembrance can only be recalled through DNA. But they get to Egypt and they create a great remembered civilization. Okay, they get to the southern parts of, the South American continent and create great civilizations of remembrance. They get to the what is that place called? Australia, and all those islands in different continents that are still expanding as the planet expands, and create great civilizations. They get about I'd say a third into China and create more great civilizations. And this was their great world comeback. They needed this. This is what gave them remembrance of their real water spiritual technologies. And being that they were on a planet that no longer was subservient just to water, now it was land, it was kind of great that there was a culture that had adapted to that. Okay? So, here we go. If we were to move into what we're going to talk about here in part 4, we're going to talk about the downfall of them. Okay? And I'm going to say how, we lost a lot of our magical instinctive nature that they had recovered through this final fall. Okay? So, I will expand on this from parts 1, 2, and 3 in ongoing lectures sometime through October, November, and December, which is either fall and winter for some of you, or spring and summer for some of you, depending on which hemisphere of the planet you live in. And I just say that to make a point, because thank you, Neil deGrasse Tyson, for talking about and proving my point that the southern pole is really the North Pole where Santa Claus lives. Because if you take a magnet, and magnets can only attract their opposites, right? Why does the northern magnet point up? It cannot be pointing at the North Pole, because it would be repelled by the North Pole if it's the northern magnet. But anyway, that's something for you to go talk to Neil deGrasse Tyson about. And we're going to continue part 4 on the Great Secondary Fall. Now, what you're going to hear here is considered hidden Illuminati knowledge. Beyond the stuff I talked about in part 1, 2, and 3, this right here is a spiritual system that was given to us by ourselves, not from a God that lives on high and wants to rule us with 10 commandments, 42 laws of Ma'at. Those things are principles of human nature. They are not God-esque, okay? What was laid down was the ideal system that we can now, with our remembrance, begin to fight back to where we were. That's the only goal we have. Fight back for our right to have this and our pineal glands and our crown chakras exploding. And our sexual chakras exploding. Because when those two things are balanced in an explosive level, you repopulate. You bring back down souls that have been missing for a long time due to non-remembrance. Without a guardian to do that reminding system that I explained back in part 1. The remembrance was through the guardian, which is neither masculine nor feminine. I don't know if you've caught on to that yet. That I'm not talking about a being with genitals, okay? Nipples or any of that. I've never been, when I say a guardian, I'm not talking about a physical being. I'm talking about a being that resonates from the sun and can inhabit flesh. Now, what our ancient Lemurian and Atlantic or Antarctic or Atlantis civilizations remembered was that we had left people behind. We had left souls behind. And those souls never, ever, ever, ever made it to the sun. Why did they not make it to the sun, where they can be reborn and rebirthed? Well, because they were pulled into the magnetics of Jupiter, being that it was so close, and there was a loss in the connection through the explosion of Tiamat. Those souls' magnetic remembrance ends up on another planet, disembodied for a very long time. It takes a lot of technology that Atlantic or the Atlantis and the Lemurians, as they're building their culture, rebuilding their cultures that have to have after having come together, to remember, well, when you as a flesh being move out of this flesh, you're captured by the sun. And then we can bring you back if we can recall your DNA makeup to a specific family structure. Well, we have a missing set of souls that also need that, but they're not in the sun anymore to be recalled. They're stuck over there in Jupiter. But lo and behold, like it's planned, a guardian does come down through the sun's vibrations. And this guardian we will call what the ancient Kemet called him or her or it. We will call it the god of writing. Thoth, the one who wrote what are called emerald tablets. You know what I'm talking about. Don't even play like you don't know this mythology. Well, Thoth remembers the entire science of bringing down beings, and now has to use an alchemy system to call down, we'll call them the ones stuck in Jupiter, are now demonic forces. Okay? There was no imbalance before this. But Thoth remembers in great remembrance of what a guardian can do, that we've left people behind, and calls forth these souls to now be reborn through solar cycles. So what in essence happens is, through what Thoth, wrote would be considered magic, caused enough vibration to enter the heavens and free the ones left behind from their Jupiter lockdown. They're brought back to the sun. Now they can be reborn freely again. But I'm going to tell you this much. A soul has no needs. A spark of the sun has no needs among the flesh. But it does have memory when it's outside of the flesh. These souls who were lost, the lost tribe, so to speak, not really a tribe, because they were all one family, but now are tribalistic amongst themselves, and now want to make sure that they can exact some retribution for having been left behind. When they're born, Thoth begins to educate them on what's currently going on the planet, because they have need for a lot of catch-up. They've been gone for millions of years from the civilization that they were once a part of, the same culture living on the planet Tiamat. And in their catch-up time, they begin to realize, because we're educating everybody back into soul remembrance, no one ever really dies, you can be brought back. They begin to remember that why they've been gone this long is because they were left behind. And the birthing of this lost soul civilization begins to happen in Thoth's period of the pharaoh dynastic times, where pharaohs are being reborn on purpose, and most of the people that have come to inhabit the planet currently are now caught into a full remembrance, and we don't lose anybody. We're starting to bring people back purposefully. Now, I'm going to tell you that purposely bringing them back was the best thing to do in the long run. What I will tell you should not have happened was the allowance of them to feel superior, having been gone for so long, to the fallen culture here, which had, degraded quite a bit. Them not so much. The last time they were here, or physicals, were on Tiamat. So I'm explaining that they felt superior in their rebirths. What was the secret science that Thoth used? Was he had to take the current human species, where it was at, and across all these cultures that encircled the entire planet, not just Africa people. He took all these cultures and he asked them to begin sacrificing themselves to allow for, and I don't mean physically killing each other, I mean sacrificing their lineage to allow for the birth of the lost ones. Okay? During this process, and our cultures agreeing to the wisdom here, the ones that start to be reborn first, and again have come into that new remembrance of that, they were left behind, want to purposely separate. They purposely want to separate and begin to take themselves out of the tribes that encompass Atlantis and Lemuria and do something odd. They chose to be amongst themselves in the southernmost tip part of the planet, which is now our North Pole. They began to leave us in their jealousy and in their not understanding that everything can't go perfectly, to make something more perfect. in what they considered their image. Now, this began the idea of how to take out solar membranes, because what the culture now has is super high technology of magic, where souls that, like I say, you could die traumatically back on Tiamat and still be brought back. Here on this planet, you can die traumatically, be forgotten, bounce off the moon now, because it's the closest gravitation pull we have, and never reach the sun. Therefore, you are here in balance as a soul, remembered through everybody else in the culture, but never brought back down. Sad. I hate to see it. This is my boy MG would say, hate to see it. Bring people back down. But these that are being separated and separating themselves on purpose. I don't know this Yakub story. It's great, but it's not the truth. They grafted themselves out of the culture through being hateful of being left behind prior, and began to make sure that they could bring themselves down and didn't need us to bring them down. And purposely knowing how to do now magic again of, higher sciences and alchemy, wanted to change the way they looked on the planet. Like, you know what? We don't need the melanin anymore. We will create a system where we never return to the sun anyway. We will inhabit the space between the moon and here because you left us behind. And now we will take over the magic. You understand? So this creates a race of people on the planet who are not melanated, as they are trying their best to bring all of their melanated left behind people that were priorly melanated on a beautiful water planet to a new species on this planet, which they've begun to create, which will not be melanated on purpose, so it can detach itself from the sun. They're mad. I'm telling you, they're mad at that. Going back to the sun ain't for them anymore. So, in these new magical systems that they create, they make sure that their ancestral lineage is kept pure for a while, and they bring back down the souls without Thoth's and the other culture's help. Okay? Now, once they've achieved this greatness of bringing back pretty much every single damn one of themselves, they make sure that they teach the new science of rebirthing, which means just bounce off the moon. When you bounce off the moon, shit, you can inhabit anything you want. You can become a plant. You can become an animal. Not really lowering yourself, but just having more fun with this planet, this new creation that we've created. And we'll remember you. We'll bring you back, but you'll never have to go to the sun and be stuck in the sun waiting your return. And this culture became very, very adept at their new tricks. Moving now down into the cultures after having lived in the southern tip of the planet, the North Pole, and those areas kind of like, very destitute, somewhere around the European areas, frosty snowman stuff, islands, come back to mainlands. And I mean mainlands, not just the top of Europe. They come through the top of America. They come through the top of China. Okay? And they begin their great ideal of taking the planet over. Now, when they lost some battles that they were purposely doing to destroy knowledge that we had, to replace our knowledge with this falser knowledge that they were hoping could be the way they would never be left behind again, knowledge. This caused a lot of what we have today as far as stories of Cain and Abel, in the Vedas, the war between, Vishnu, oh gosh, I'm gonna forget that. I'll have to make an edit, maybe not. But the wars in the heavens, okay, were between an Atlantis Lemurian culture who remembered the water technology, created vast water vehicles, things in the sky, you know, look like zeppelins, look like balloons, but they're UFOs to us today. They created those. And that other culture, the third culture on the planet, the third kind, did not have the ability to remember all of that yet, so they just took it. That was their war. Their war was to take those technologies first, wipe out the remembrance of how those technologies came from an ancient realm, an ancient planet way beyond this planet, and start a new culture of destitute remembrance. And they knew all they had to do was take that knowledge from the two cultures that had remembered to the point where they couldn't do their magic anymore and bring back their own souls on purpose. Now Thoth, being the guardian at this time, while these wars are going on, again, is a non-judgmental being and goes into stasis, so to speak. Like you know, when you put your computer to sleep and it's still on, but it's not really off. The screen is off. You know, it's not using. It's in a low-powered state. That's what Thoth did. She went into a very low-powered state and really escaped flesh to go right back to the sun and just chill for a while. Because right now, what had been created by its own choices had caused this new revelation on the planet. And again, this is not the same guardian that witnessed the first fall. So there's no reason for it to have like a heartfelt, oh, I'm doing it again, I'm messing up, trust me. This is not a guardian's nature. It just goes on shutdown mode. And the story of Thoth, the creature, the guardian, is then mythicized, put into dope mythologies so that it can never really be understood as what it really is. The non-melanated race now has chosen to start a new revolution on the planet, changing the one language that the Lemurians and Atlanteans speak into a engineered vocabulary. Engineered through their own knowledge of vibrational music manipulation. Every word you say is like singing a song. I said back in part 1, you know, the birds don't whistle out of tune. The dolphins don't hum out of key. But once you were to teach them to hum and sing out of key, they can do it forever. So the language changing caused these civilizations to start speaking out of key. Because the memory they had regained was now being destroyed through systematic reculture and reappropriation. Similar to what we're kind of experiencing today, huh? It's kind of just still going on, to be honest with you. So you get, in essence, a warring culture who was being brought back down from the star, wanted to wipe out the remembered knowledge that Lemurians and Atlanteans had brought back to all of the planet, so that it had entire remembrance of itself. And in the midst of them doing these things, and this only takes, in this time frame, a couple hundred years for this changeover to be fully enacted by the rebirth of the ones left behind, that they begin to manipulate the ether through what we now consider demonic entities. Like I said, they were going to inhabit things. They were going to use the mismagic of not going back to the sun and coming back here as a spiritual being for a little bit of time to be utilized as something more powerful outside of the flesh. This was the true story that the Bible and many other written texts have tried to say about fall, about like the demons or the jinn that can grant wishes and things of that nature. This is really the encompassing of how that came along. It would not have been a paradigm had it not been for us losing and leaving some people behind, some souls behind. They created this new paradigm of the new magic where the disembodied souls can be utilized. Okay? And in this now began to take a person like you or I and send one of their lost ancestors who's now passed forward, but also was reborn here, but now has the understanding of the mission that they must do, or that they think they must do, so is ready and empowered on the other side of death to manipulate physical beings here in the physical plane, calling it possessions, the ability to just make somebody go crazy, the ability to whisper in people's ears. So many things that aren't internal, that come from an external source. Because DNA is the internal electrical computer that every being is gifted with. When you're popped out of this little vessel that you're in, you become a soul. Hopefully attracted back to the sun. When you're not, and you're doing it on purpose, you become an anti-soul. And these anti-souls run around doing the most devilish shit on the planet, because to them there is no good and evil. They know that they've come from a place that never existed anyway. But they know that with enough tricks, we could be manipulated into forgetting that and being taught these two things to allow for a control system where there would be less of us, hopefully, in their minds, and more of them. And there'd be no more guardians born, unless they could have the control over the guardian. Because, again, being left behind, they would never want a guardian to have that power over them again. Period. Point blank. So, you end up getting a bunch of new spiritual systems that are birthed across the different continents of the planet. Because these people are now being manipulated by a higher, out-of-bodied, demonic soul. Anti-soul. Anti-souls pretty much caused a lot of the revolution that we see, because it made things very, very spiritual for certain people that were now not connected back to the sun remembrance, and were being taught by these Nephilim thingies. You know what I mean? Kind of the fallen angel thingy when you think about it. It's not really that serious. I don't want to go too deep into Nephilim mating with the daughters of men, because they think the daughters of men were beautiful. Really, that's a metaphor for they would not come back into bodies and would overtake us in our bodies. Like the Matrix even points this out. I stop at a lot of movie references, but the Matrix even points this out. Because every agent could be in any body at any time. Think about it. So, what we're getting at, or what I'm kind of concluding here in part 4, is you're going to get an ancient system that was destroyed through a manipulative system that Thoth, the great writer, was hoping would just reconstitute all the souls that were from the Tiamat exploration, so that they could at least be one family again. But when those souls were brought back down and taught what had been going on since they were gone, sought retribution. And in their retribution, created many of the mystical orders that are on the planet today to allow for the misteaching of the soul, so that they could have the power over rebirth. And that's kind of it. Taking away the ability for us to actually vibrate through our 7th chakra, telling us that Antarctica, once there was the second ice age, was just some continent no one ever even saw. Because the second ice age, which I have not even dived into, was only a cycle of the planet that now had to reoccur because of the initial fall of the planet and the meteorite that struck the planet and caused a very big global ice age. We were now encompassed in that cycle to have it repeat kind of often. And during that often cycle, this is when the ones who were being reborn into non-melanated beings took their chance to do their most damage. And now it takes us to the fall of Egypt. Atlantis and Lemuria had been fallen and were now distributed amongst the planet. But there was a new technology in town called the Fallen Ones, or again, the anti-souls, who could roam the planet, talk to their flesh ancestors, and help manipulate the progress of their agenda by making sure that all of the creatures who were conscious went into a sleep and forgot about what really happened. Again, when we wake up and thaw out of that ice age, begins the advent of isms that split off into the stories that were now mythologized to talk about the gods and the greatness of where they came from and how they created us. And all they needed next was to change the story of Thoth one more time, one more specific time, and they changed the story of Thoth into a Jesus character. You're gonna be mad at me, Christians. Jesus was here, not under the name Jesus, but again, under the name that would be more specific to the culture he was trying to, as he was born to this culture, free from mental slavery of this new culture on the planet. Like I said, these anti-souls don't want Thoth to reteach it. And get rid of it. Get rid of it quickly. Snuff any sign of any ancient guardian sneaking on the planet. Snuff them out. Don't let them begin the ideas that help people remember how to bring back down their own cultural souls. Because as long as we have that, it's like having the towers in the Lord of the Rings. You have Isengard, and you have freaking, the place that, Saruman owns. Sauron, whatever his name is, with the evil eye on the tower. Twin Towers. You have these two opposing cultures having fought and won because they used enough trickology to take back the remembrance that we had gained during the rebirth the first time. So now here we are today with all these different religions, all these different ways of speaking. Vocabulary has changed very significantly. The way we understand our brain has changed very significantly. We're very much more metallic based, pulled away from the water on purpose, so that we cannot remember where we originally began our star journeys. So, my cosmic friends and family, this has been a part 4 lecture into some of the things hidden in Masonry, some of the things hidden in Rosicrucianism, Satanism, even down to Pentecostal religions, where I'm going to tell you this much: they speak in tongues, through possession of what they're calling the Holy Spirit, but it's in essence an ancestor that is manipulating the current mental state away from being able to remember where it came from and what magic it really has without having to be under the subject of any other human on the planet. And with that said, I just want to remind you that, again, you are a planet, and every planet wears a crown. Right now, we're just upside down. We don't have remembrance of ourselves. So if you take anything from this lecture, go do your own research, find out again why you are not in balance with the planet. It doesn't have a lot to do with what you think it does. It has more to do with your perception and how you've been manipulated, and how we can take that manipulation and start to counterbalance it. Every planet wears a crown.